Today's video is about one of the most terrifying serial killers in the history of the United States. Serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, who killed 17 men and boys for approximately 13 years. He didn't stop at just killing. Most of his victims were strangled and their bodies were sexually violated. He would then dismember their bodies, skin them, and keep their skeletal remains or part of them to consume later. Sometimes, he would also drill holes into the skulls of his still living victims. He began committing his crimes at an early age and suffered from what is known as paraphilia disorder. This serial killer was the eldest son of his father Lionel Dahmer and his mother Joyce Dahmer. He was born in Wisconsin in 1960. He had one younger brother named David. Jeffrey was a normal child, but he suffered from a lack of attention from his mother and showed no signs of brilliance or intelligence during his studies. His family experienced several domestic problems, which later led to their separation. His mother took custody of David and left Jeffrey to be taken care of by his father and stepmother. The separation of his parents negatively affected him, and he became an alcoholic at an early age. He was known for isolating himself from his peers and now forming close friendships with people of both sexes throughout his school years. He showed no interest in women from a young age and claimed to be homosexual. Jeffrey's strange behavior began at the age of 14. He constantly thought about killing, became addicted to alcohol, dropped out of college in his second year, and was forcibly enlisted and sent to Germany in December 1987. After learning more about his upbringing, let's talk about his crimes and victims. His first crime was committed at the age of 18, immediately after graduating from high school in 1978. His first victim was Stephen Hicks, a 19-year-old who was trying to find a ride to a party. Jeffrey was attracted to him and tried to seduce him for sexual activity. He lured him to his house and then killed him by beating and strangling him. Jeffrey later dismembered his body, analyzed the remains, crushed the bones, and scattered them in the backyard of his childhood home. His second crime was committed in November 1987. He met his second victim, Stephen Twomey, who was 25 years old at a gay bar. At that time, Jeffrey was living with his grandmother and had not disclosed his homosexuality to her. He used to meet his friends outside the house. He was obsessed with drugging his victims and sexually assaulting them while they were unconscious. He attempted to drug Stephen while they were staying in a hotel, but he accidentally drank from the same glass as Stephen. This caused him to have no memory of how the murder was committed, but he remembered how he disposed of the body later. No remains of Stephen's body were found. In 1988, he committed two murders. The first was when he met James Dockstader, a 14-year-old, at a bus stop outside a gay bar in Wisconsin. He lured him to go with him, and James, who was a Native American and had escaped from his abusive father, met his death at the hands of Jeffrey just 2 days after running away from home. The second victim that year was a 22-year-old Spanish man named Richard Guerrero. Jeffrey enticed him with money to take nude photos of him and took him to his grandmother's house, where he killed him in the basement. He kept his body in acid for months before disposing of the remains. His fifth crime took place in 1989, and the victim was Anthony Sears, a 24-year-old African-American. He was Jeffrey's first African-American victim and also the last one to be killed in his grandmother's house. After raping and killing him, Jeffrey kept his skull and some of his genitalia. Anthony was the first victim from whom some parts of the body were recovered. Although most of the victims were young people, Jeffrey committed his sixth crime in 1990. The victim this time was Raymond Smith, a 32-year-old young man with dark skin who worked in the field of gay prostitution. He was the first person to be killed in Jeffrey's last apartment in Oxford. In 1990, he met Ernest Marquez at a box store. Ernest was 22 years old and a dance student. Due to his physical strength, Jeffrey could not strangle him to death, so instead, he cut his throat and left him to bleed to death. Unlike his other victims, Jeffrey didn't dispose or dissect Ernest's body. He kept it intact and proceeded to dismember it. Ernest's body was the first one Jeffrey used for cannibalism. He consumed Ernest's heart and other parts of his body. After his last crime, he didn't wait long. He committed his ninth crime in the same month. He killed David Thomas, a 22-year-old man. Jeffrey seduced and drugged him, but unlike his other victims, he didn't rape, alive or dead, because he didn't find him attractive, according to his statement. So, he decided to dispose of the body after killing him. It seems that Jeffrey couldn't resist his demonic desires for long. He couldn't find relief from killing anymore. He began committing consecutive crimes in the same year, with victims ranging from the 11th to the 17th, all in 1991. In April, he met his 11th victim, Errol Lindsay, who was 19 years old. Jeffrey seduced him into going to his apartment and drugged him. Jeffrey experimented with Errol by drilling a hole in his skull and injecting hydrochloric acid into his brain to create, as he described, a living zombie. The experiment failed, and Jeffrey proceeded to dismember the body, keeping some parts and the skull. In May of the same year, shortly after killing Errol, he met his 12th victim, Anthony Hughes, who was 31 years old, deaf, and mute. Jeffrey lured him to his apartment and killed him by beating and strangling him, leaving his body for 3 days before dismembering it. The most horrifying crime among Jeffrey's crimes was his 13th, which he committed just 4 days after killing Anthony. The victim was a 14-year-old boy named Conrad, an immigrant from Laos. Jeffrey had previously been convicted of molesting Conrad's older brother and spent a year in prison. In this crime, Jeffrey drugged Conrad and injected hydrochloric acid into his head, leaving to get some beer. The surprise came when the child woke up and left Jeffrey's apartment, only to collapse in front of the building unconscious. 3 women find him and try to save him, and they called the police, who arrived. When Jeffrey returned and found the woman and the police with the unconscious Conrad, he claimed that the boy was not a minor and that he was 18 years old, his lover who lived with him. Under the shock of the women, the police allowed Jeffrey to take the child and bring him back to his apartment to dismember him later. Jeffrey committed his 17th and final crime on July 19, 1991. His last victim was Joseph Breithoft, a 25-year-old man from Minnesota who was the father of 3 children. When Jeffrey met him, Joseph was looking for work in Wisconsin, and Jeffrey enticed him with some money in exchange for taking some explicit photos. Jeffrey killed him and left him in his bed for 2 days. On July 22, 1991, Jeffrey encountered 3 gay men and offered to pay one of them $100 to pose for explicit photos. One of them, named Tracy Edwards, agreed. However, upon entering Jeffrey's apartment, Tracy noticed bloodstains and an unbearable stench emanating from the place, making him feel uncomfortable. He requested to leave, but Jeffrey didn't allow him to do so and handcuffed one of his friends. Feeling endangered, Tracy decided to play along with Jeffrey, convincing him that he would stay with him for the night and allowing him to take semi-nude photos. Afterwards, Tracy attacked Jeffrey and managed to escape from the apartment. After his escape, Tracy encountered the police patrol and informed them about what had happened, including Jeffrey's attempt to kill him. They accompanied him back to the apartment where the incident occurred and were met with the smell of death and scattered blood. After a brief search, the officers discovered photographs of dismembered bodies and pictures of Jeffrey in various stages of dismemberment, leading to his arrest. Jeffrey confessed to all of his crimes and provided information about the remains of his victims. He explained how he committed the crimes and expressed that he deserved the death penalty, but Wisconsin did not have capital punishment. Jeffrey's trial began in January 1992, where he was held in a bulletproof glass cage. He was sentenced to life imprisonment for the 15 first-degree murders, which amounted to over 900 years in prison. Jeffrey served his sentence at the Columbia Correctional Institution. However, on November 28, 1994, his fellow inmate Christopher Scarver bludgeoned him to death with an iron bar. Jeffrey was taken to the hospital, but died from his injuries. Scarver informed authorities that Jeffrey did not scream or show any concern during his fatal beating, claiming that God instructed him to do it and that he had no remorse for killing him. According to Jeffrey's will, his body was cremated and he requested that no grave or memorial be erected for him. And with that, we reach the end of the dark journey of American serial killer Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, who committed his heinous crimes from 1978 to 1991. We hope you enjoyed the video. And remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and activate the notifications bell to receive updates on new content.